I will turn off Minecraft.
Your mic was totally open when you said that.
Oh, perfect.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
We're here to talk about The Mandalorian. There's three of us. We got myself and Gina and Django, and my son Grogu's here with us. There's going. Oh, you want? Yes. Sorry. I just saw your message, Django. I'll do that now. But we're here. Let's two pieces of business off the bat. One boring, one not as much. First bit is there won't be a book club video today because I'm gonna do it tomorrow because we're streaming today for anyone who cares. Second bit of business, we're gonna get this out of the way before we get into the episode because we want to talk about the episode. However, there is a lot of controversy around this episode because, I guess, spoilers. I mean, it's in the title and it's in the thumbnail. So, like, anytime somebody gets this far, I don't have any sympathy for you if I spoil something for you, but whatever. So, Ahsoka was in the episode, played by Rosario Dawson. There's a controversy because there were allegations made against her. Currently, those are cleared, which can mean a lot or a little to you, depending on your opinion, like, how much you trust things. I just want to say that if you like, how do I put these specifically affect the trans and non-binary communities, and if you are upset, or I don't even like that word because I feel like upset inherently sounds condescending sometimes, but if you have a negative feeling towards this episode because of the casting, like, I think all of us here support how anybody would feel about it, and this isn't to, like, condone any kind of actions against those communities at all, because no one should be afraid to just exist, right? So if it hopefully it does not, I mean, we're still going to talk about the episode, I guess is what I'm saying, but we're not doing so ignorant of other things that are afoot, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yep.
But with that, that's right, Django. But with that, let's jump into the discussion. So, a lot happened. Hey, Lynn's here. I didn't say hi to anybody else, actually. Lynn's here, good friend of mine. Ian, Mick. There were several people in the chat. Thank you all for being here. I was very distracted by getting the business out. But, so what...
I mean, I think we can start off with what's probably the most important point of discussion.
Yes.
When the magistrate says that the spear is pure Beskar, does that imply that his armor is not pure Beskar? I mean, that's...
She says pure Beskar like yours. So that means other armor isn't pure Beskar.
I mean, I just feel like that's a Bo-Katan call-out right there. I know that's what the internet is abuzz about this week. I just wanted to get that.
That's the single most important thing. Hey, Zolan, welcome. I mean, there's so much, though, because, like, you joke, but, I mean, that is pretty cool that there's just this spear of Beskar.
Yeah.
You know, if anything, Ian says, if anything, that craps on Clone Wars and Rebels armor. Certainly obviously his armor at the first season wasn't pure Beskar. So what do you guys think of, there were a lot of people who wanted Ahsoka to keep the staff because they thought it's going to be the Ahsoka, the white, her staff. I guess that depends on where you think this episode falls in the Rebels timeline.
Okay, so I never expected her to keep it for the reasons that were given in the show, just because we spent this whole time, like, anytime there's Beskar or anything, or from the first episode when he took not Cobb's, but Boba Fett's armor and stuff, it's like, this belongs with the Mandalorian.
Yep.
And so that's just something I expected.
Armor. Come on. That man wears it well enough.
So I never expected her to keep it, just because it never even crossed my mind, just because it'd be something that's like, no, it belongs with a Mandalorian.
Right. I think the real question is, why has he not started plating the Razor Crest in Beskar?
It's a good point. point.
You could do with a few less whistling birds and more hole plating on your ship, so that you don't have to have like fish netting holding your whole plates together.
I want him to take the spear he now has and like tie a rope to it and then like shoot it, like harpoon other ships with the Beskar spear.
There was when this will matter to no one.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna say this anyway. When Star Trek Enterprise first came out, we all knew it was going to be a prequel to the original series. I made so many jokes about just having a big like slingshot, and they were just gonna no torpedoes and phasers involved, just like boulders and patching up the hole with duct tape, and that's the Razor Crest.
I think that's great. Ian asks, why wasn't Vader's armor just painted Beskar or plated in Beskar? Well, it's like to bring up everyone's favorite canon novels, which is the new canon Zahn novels. Especially everyone's favorite. That was sarcasm. I mean, I love them, but Twitter hates them, so it's fine. But in Alliances, right, that had Cortosis armor in it, and that was like the big thing. So,
yeah.
I love the why don't they just questions anytime we talk about anything. Why don't they just do this? Why didn't they just ride the Eagles to Mordor?
But were you going to say more, Gina, about the timeline of like when it takes place?
No, I'm pretty much good. No, I was actually just thinking about, once again, Kay, because I'm here, I got to go off on a tangent.
Yep.
I've like never seen The Lord of the Rings. And
Fair.
so it took me a hot second to get that reference that you made. I'm assuming it's a Lord of the Rings reference. I don't know that.
All you need to know about the Lord of the Rings is they should have just ridden the Eagles from the very beginning, and it would have solved all of their problems.
Okay.
That will be the most controversial thing I say on this stream.
Now I'm just resisting the urge to spend 20 minutes explaining why they couldn't have. That goes into an amount of lore that we don't have time for.
Back in the day, on like Port Haven forums, when we were just forums, I started a 3-day argument across like all of the forums about the Eagles and Mordor, and I'm still proud of that.
This makes me want to watch these movies.
I didn't realize it was tongue-in-cheek for most of that. This was earlier in our friendship.
In my younger, more rambunctious days, I used to love to very innocently start arguments I didn't care about between people who did care about them, just to see what would happen. I've mostly grown out of it.
I was going to say...
You got a Twitter account.
I was going to say, I remember at least maybe twice within the last 2 weeks where I logged on to Twitter and I was like, look at Jess starting stuff. That's hilarious.
I was like who is this? Wrong answers only, and it was a picture of Ray, and I was like, a nobody.
Nobody.
I feel like people know me well enough, though, because very few people ever take me up on it. I am a chaos. I'm just like, where do you think my son gets it? Where do you think Grogu gets his chaos agency? It's 100% from me.
That's a very good point. Okay, so wait, I have a question for both of you.
Okay.
First of all, just for the record, do you like the name? Second of all, do you wish we'd gotten it earlier? Like the amount of time, do you think that affects how people feel about the name?
You go first, Django, because I will get started and go.
I mean, I have no problem with the name. I don't know that it was like particularly endearing. I'm glad that it's not like a Zahn, have 4 vowels in a row followed by, KQX or something like that. And we have to have, a 20-minute explanation on how it's pronounced. But to the second part of your question, I think people would care less about it if we had gotten it sooner. But I don't know of a good story way that we could have gotten it sooner.
Yeah.
And unless it's, like Elf, and it's just like, written on his diapers or something, it's just, oh, this is Buddy, I don't know. But so yeah, I think people probably would have reacted to it differently. But I think in terms of the story, it makes a lot of sense to not have gotten it until now.
My first reaction when I heard the name was it doesn't start with a Y, which as somebody who also plays like the KOTOR games, like Vandar Toker, first of all, he has 2 names, which is wrong anyway, but like I forgave him for that, and it doesn't start with a Y, so like I don't know why I was thinking it would start with a Y, but my first thought was like, wait, is that his name because it starts with a G? But then, like, what sold it for me was when he was like so happy to hear his name. I'm like, it could have been Cupcake. Like, I don't care if he's happy to hear his name. I'm happy. So like, that's kind of how it is.
It could have been Steve.
I hate that so much. I just hate it. I hate every part of it, but I've come to terms with it. But that's not, you do this. You bring this up, and then I lose my point. But actually, I was expecting us to get the name later at this point. So I figured at some point in the first season they were just going to name him, like he was gonna, like it was like Grief Karga or somebody was gonna be like, how he needs a name and like just invent one. I wasn't ever actually expecting to learn his name. To me, actually, to get to, like, this is the point we can get to after your question, of like how much Grogu has an awareness of the world around him. I didn't think he would necessarily have known his name. So like the idea that he could ever tell his name was completely lost on me. And so I thought at this point it would have been like later, like we meet the person, like Pershing would have known it, Dr. Pershing or something. But like the idea of Ahsoka just like reads his name from his mind was really cool to me. And like, it's not even that he's so happy to hear his name, he's like surprised that she knew it. And like that story beat I thought was really cool. How about you, Gina?
I don't mind his name. I'm probably still gonna say Baby Yoda just because it's like a habit for like maybe like a year now of having that. But it sounds Star Wars-y to me. I like it. I also never expected to get his actual name, especially like this soon. But also, and part of it I think is the fact that we've been calling him Baby Yoda.
Yeah.
Is that I forget that he's like 50, so I think of him as an actual infant.
Yeah.
And so I also never expected him to be aware, because even though he's like does all these things and he's amazing, to me it's like a baby. Why would you know these things? And so like that still hasn't, the age thing still hasn't matched up in my mind, but I do like his name. I'm just probably gonna have to remind myself to use it.
Use Grogu. I was full Grogu after like 3 hours of seeing the episode.
I definitely thought the same thing though about the sort of developmental thing when he's like down the little passageway and Dan is like, no, hook the red wire to the thing, and I'm like, he's a baby, like why are you he doesn't have you gone over shapes and colors yet? Like, did you get out the picture book while you're in hyperspace, like with my niece and nephews? I'm like, this is the
he
red
did, but
ball.
it's of guns, not of colors. This is what's in my armory in the back. This is what it does. I just want to point out, Zolan says, I wanted Ahsoka to say his name was Frank, thus furthering the child's connection to Papa Palpatine. Yes, his name should have been Frank. I will always say Frank is a better name for Palpatine than Sheev. He says it in the movie. I must be Frank, Your Majesty. He tells you right there.
Ian asked an interesting question. I wonder if the baby stuff is kind of an act like Yoda.
It's interesting. So in all seriousness, I think this is an interesting question because there's that mischievousness, right? Like he takes the kids' cookies, the whole debate that came out of the second episode this season with the eggs. Like, how much does he have an awareness? And I've been thinking a lot about this. And if you kind of think of him less as like a baby and more like a non-verbal toddler, and as kind of weird and dark and depressing as this sounds, he's been on his own for so long and like probably held by mercenaries. He's probably older developmentally than he sounds because he hasn't had somebody like teach him to speak. And so I feel like he's kind of in that terrible twos. Like, he knows what he is and isn't supposed to do. He knows when something's wrong, but he doesn't really know why. So like he might know it's wrong to take the bratty kid's cookies, but he's gonna take them because he wants the cookies, and no one's there to tell him not to take the cookies. You know what I mean? That's just how I read it.
Yeah. I mean, and Ahsoka says too, you know, he's suppressed his force powers out of like necessity.
Right.
So like he could have, you know, for the last decade or 30 years, spent time, you know, acting more innocent than he might other. Not, I mean, innocent makes it sound like he's, you know, chaotic evil or something.
He is though. I'm very proud of my chaotic evil son.
But developing a persona, you know, as a defense mechanism is another possibility.
I can see that as well.
No, and then I think of the idea of like socialization, like spending so long on your own, learning how to be around people, to go like immediately all around these, which also could explain part of like the attachment thing so much. Finding someone you can trust. You're definitely not going to act the way you normally would.
Exactly. Yeah, I think there's a lot to that, and I think it's because he clearly has clear enough memories for Ahsoka to read. And then when she gets to the one part, she says his memories turn dark. I couldn't tell if she meant dark in terms of like depressing and like something he would want to repress, or dark as in murky and things were going around and he couldn't process them, or maybe it's a bit of both. But like I mean, like, I know I joke about being his mother, but like my heart broke the way he just started sitting there, like he got so sad as she's telling his tale.
Meanwhile, I think about Cal too. He's just been through some stuff, right?
Yeah. I took it as like the idea of murky, like don't really know what happened. And then part of me thinks like that's like an incredibly sad moment, you know, because he's been through so much. But it's also probably an incredibly happy and relieving moment because finally like Din knows, like somebody knows. Right. And so like from now on, communication, etc., looks different because finally someone knows what happened, who you are, etc.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it too. I like to my mind has already been spinning stories about like Yoda having a backpack like Luke has in The Empire Strikes Back, and Grogu's in the backpack, and Yoda just like runs him through the Jedi Temple and shows him where all the best food places are, because humans like weird food, but Yoda knows where all the good food is, and they just hang out and have food adventures, and that's what he did for like 30 years. That's what goes on in my head.
That sounds perfect, actually. Oh my goodness. So there is a mall on the planet of Yoda's.
Yes.
And there's a giant food court in said mall. There's multiple food courts. There's for like different types of cultures, different places. They have a food court.
Yep.
For what?
For cookies, eggs, fish, frogs, all sorts of everything that he's eaten so far.
The lore deepens of the planet of Yoda.
I'm waiting for that call, you know. I gotta say, I loved that. I feel like it's almost kind of obvious with his age that he could have been a Jedi, and I feel like that's something people kind of wondered. But then when we heard it, I was like, this is cool, though. And I think about it too, because like I know I've talked to you, Gina, about it. How like I'll have rules for storytelling, but then when it's my favorite character, I don't care, and you can break all those rules. And like one of the things that I'm sick of is like another Jedi survived the Purge. Oh my gosh, how many Jedi survived the Purge? But then they're like, Grogu survived the Purge. I'm like, this is the best story ever. I'm fully aware it's hypocritical.
I mean, I think a couple of things I would say to some of the points that you've made. To that, I mean, at least part of that, we know the Empire kept him alive.
Yeah.
We don't know how long he was in Imperial custody, but part of that is explained by, whatever experimentation they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And like the fallout of that. But also, I think it also raises a question for me, and this is going to get like too sidetracked, so we don't necessarily have to talk about this unless you have thoughts. But like, we know that when the Jedi, I don't want to say take children because that plays, but like there's a certain level of development that like a certain age
Mm-hmm.
that when a child is brought to the temple, they're not in diapers,
Right.
Like there's a level of development there, and so it raises the question of if he is still, in basically a toddler stage,
Mm-hmm.
At what point would it have made sense developmentally for them to bring him into the temple, or if it is an issue of, being Yoda species,
Mm-hmm.
like do you just make like you say, do you throw out all the rules and like no, like literally as soon as possible, let's get this kid in the temple because there's a like a species level potential there that means we can't wait until he's potty trained.
Well, there is the very popular fan theory that he is the child of Yoda and Yaddle, and so he just magically showed up in the temple steps one day. Which I'm not sure how I feel about that, because there's a 300-year age difference between Yoda and Yaddle.
I do not like it.
Ian says, I kind of wonder if they had Grogu previously at all, or if they found out about him and wanted him for the M count. Because we know we know the Imperials had him in season 1 when Din gave him away unforgivably for a couple of hours to go get his armor, and then he got him back. But like when we find him elsewise, he's just like with some mercs in a valley and has apparently been there long enough for Queel to be like, I'm gonna help you so you literally get these people off my lawn. I'm paraphrasing, but I feel like that was the spirit behind what Queel said. So like I do kind of wonder, because he could have been in and out of different people's custody for so long.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We did know that some Jedi do that. We do not leave people on the doorstep. I mean, that was in Jedi Lost for sure. Just to have a cabin reference. No, I think that's an interesting question though, and I've always wondered that because when it ties into Ahsoka actually. When Ahsoka came on the scene, we were not in the Disney era of canon yet, right? Legends canon was still canon. And at the time, it was established that being too old to be a Padawan was 13 for Obi-Wan in the Jedi Apprentice books. And then Ahsoka comes along, and she's 14, but really young to be a Padawan. And I remember that caused a big stink for a while. But to me, it always made sense that some species age differently. So, like, 14 could be young for Torgruda, but old for human. And so I kind of wonder... And a lot of this ties into the fact that in my headcanon, Yoda species start as tadpoles, and I have no evidence for that whatsoever, but in my head, they were tadpoles at one point. And so somebody could have been fishing and been like, wow, I just caught this force-sensitive tadpole and I don't know what to do. And then took it to the Jedi, and they're like, well, we have a tadpole now. And then there came Grogu. This is why I shouldn't write Star Wars.
No, I accept this headcanon. I mean, I didn't even think about him as a Jedi because, especially, so we all know I started watching with The Force Awakens, but especially after we got Rogue One and I decided to watch the Clone Wars and stuff, I decided to train my mind out of thinking that anyone who uses the Force has to be a Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it was nice to get this piece of information and I accept it.
Mm-hmm.
But for a while I was just like, okay, but so I didn't even entertain the thought until now.
Yeah.
And now I'm cool with it. I was just like, oh, okay, you are a Jedi. Because now I'm starting to think just because you can do this doesn't mean you are one.
Right.
And so.
It's true. I think, well, and that ties into so many conversations that have come up recently, especially with the sequel trilogy, is that there's this, people who are Force sensitive kind of can innately, through instinct, access the Force and do things. Of course. So, it's very possible that Grogu could have done all the things we had seen him do in the seasons without any kind of Jedi training. And I really wonder what kind of training he could have even had as a toddler, because you can't sit a toddler down and be like, now watch out for the dark side because it might corrupt you, and then this is what evil is, and this is what fear leads to hate, which leads to you how much training could he? Clearly he didn't even get his colors, so I really don't know what kind of training he had at the temple for all of these masters he apparently had. I don't know, but I think there's this idea that everybody either has to have had 10 years of training to do anything, or this idea that if people can instinctually do it, they never need to be trained again. And I think both of those thought patterns are wrong.
And another possibility too that I'm only now thinking about is that he might have been in some pretty extreme isolation.
Yeah.
In the temple, like if his existence was a Jedi secret, you know, then he might have been kept separate even from other Jedi, even from other younglings, you know, such that some of those dark memories may just be, you know, he had a room in the Jedi temple that he never got to leave or something like that.
Except for when Yoda took him in his backpack to go look for food, Jake. No, you're not wrong, though. Actually, it was kind of interesting. Did anybody... another thing I saw, like, going around Discords and Twitter was the Yaddle erasure. Because Ahsoka was like, I've known only one other being. And it was...
I mean, I think it makes sense that Ahsoka might not have known Yaddle.
Yaddle, yeah.
And to be fair, I also always forget about Yaddle.
So, like, you would think I would be really into Yaddle because I'm such a freak about Yoda, but the only time we see Yaddle, like, on screen for the longest time is, like, when she's on the Jedi Council in Phantom. And as Mick points out, Yaddle dies before we get to Attack of the Clones. Or at least that's how it was in Legends. I think that might be established in current canon also. But, 8-year-old me watching The Phantom Menace who didn't understand what actors were and just thought, like, you were one role. Like, I knew they weren't real, but I thought you played one character your whole life and you could never play anything else in a movie again. So, like, I didn't understand how movies work. That version of me understood there was something fundamentally wrong about the puppet Yoda in 1999. And I remember trying really hard to explain that he's just younger and so he looked weird. But, like, the puppet for Yaddle was as meth head terrifying as Yoda, only she had hair. So, like, I tried to mentally repress Yaddle for years. And that probably makes me a bad Yoda stan in general. But she always scared me.
I don't know the story behind her, but in my head, I guess I always just never think about her because in my head, the story someone went, we need a girl version of Yoda. And then George was like, have Yaddle. And because it feels like such an afterthought, I'm always just like, she's which is probably like terrible to Yaddle fans. Right. I don't know if there's anyone out there who stands Yaddle.
I think Charles Soule might be the only one.
I mean, I'm sure there's some kind of weird Star Wars card trader obsession.
Oh, those were creepy days. Yeah, according to Ian, Yaddle was a rejected young puppet Yoda design. Well, probably because of the hair.
I mean, that makes me wonder if they're gonna like retcon some of the designs in the High Republic to be like Yaddle-like.
Well, we have 600-year-old Yoda, and he just looks like Daniel Jose Older, so. Which isn't a bad thing at all, but it's like, I can tell where you got that smirk from, concept artist. No, I loved all of it. I guess, so we've spent appropriately half an hour on my son. There was, Django, you had texted me something, and you were like, I want to talk about this. Have we talked about it yet?
No. So the thing that I texted you about was actually something that you brought up to me.
Oh.
I don't know if you realize this.
No.
But you said something to me the other day. You were mentioning, would Ahsoka, and because like the premise of why Ahsoka says she can't train Grogu is, right. I'm afraid, right? Like I can tell he's powerful. Yep. I've seen what happens when powerful goes bad, and so it's just better not to at all.
Right.
Right. Like that's part of the whole like discussion around Fallen Order, right? Is it just better to say no?
Right.
We just won't train anybody anymore. But one of the things you asked me is, do we believe that Ahsoka would have been aware that Vader was redeemed? In the same way that Leia appears to be aware that Ben was redeemed. Would Ahsoka have been aware of that? Like, would their connection? I mean, because like she senses Vader, right? Like in the or is it? I guess in Rebels.
Yeah.
Like she realizes who Vader is.
Yep.
Like, so would there have been some connection when that redemption happened, where she could say, hey, maybe this is not something we have to be like so afraid of, or is it she is aware and is like, well, we're fresh out of doe-eyed sons to come along and be the catalyst for that redemption, because I mean, as far as we know, she never met Luke,
right?
So she doesn't know the means by which Vader would have been redeemed. But so I don't know. It's just some of that, and again, some of that will be like the timeline question again. If it's a couple of years after Return of the Jedi, then there's more time for her to have heard or known about what happened with Vader compared to sooner. So I don't know, but just anybody had thoughts along those lines, or just in general that motivation for why you didn't want to train Grogu.
I think that I don't see Ahsoka not sensing Anakin's return unless it's a situation where she pulls a Skywalker and decides to cut herself off from the Force for a little bit because she's freaking out, and then have just missed it. That to me is the only way she doesn't sense Anakin's return personally. However, I think that see, like what Ian says, would it be good enough for her to risk it, considering Vader being made fueled the Empire for 2 decades? Because he came back. So I don't know that her fear would be Grogu never returning to the light, as much as at what cost would his turning to the dark at all be.
I mean, but part of that too is that Anakin didn't know that was a possibility either.
Yeah.
And until Luke, nobody, it goes on for 2 decades because it never occurs to Yoda or Obi-Wan that Anakin could be redeemed, so they never bothered to try.
Right. Yeah.
I even if you knew the answer that it was possible to be redeemed, I think you would still have to, especially because there was so much destruction, I think you would still ask yourself, what is this one life worth? How many lives is this one life worth?
Yeah.
To even try. I still think to ask to even try is still valid because you've seen so much destruction. Mm-hmm. So I could still see her being no, still not worth it. Even if we could, even if you went down a dark path and we got him back in 5 years instead, or 2 years instead, what can happen in those 1 year, 6 months, whatever, is still pretty terrible. So I think it's still enough to be well, maybe not.
I think,
but she doesn't raise that point with Kanan and Ezra though. She doesn't say, hey, you should give up on this Ezra kid because there's too much danger involved.
But I think too, though, the importance there is a lot of that time is before she confronts Vader. And I think the confrontation with Vader really changes her.
And so is she interested in finding Ezra to say, hey, I found you in whale space, but you should probably not be a Jedi now, because I don't know. I'm just having a hard time squaring all of those things, and it makes sense. And I'm not saying it doesn't make sense, and of course I kept expecting well, I'm not really a Jedi line anyway.
Yeah.
And we never got one of those, and so there's that consideration too. Mm-hmm. It just feels like there's just one too many things to make it fit perfectly for me.
I think that there could be a certain level too of, not that she thinks Grogu can't be trained, but that she isn't the person to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair. Yeah.
Because even though she kind of through her own journey kind of found her own way with the Force, that doesn't mean that she would know how to train somebody who would be complicated to train. And I think there's a certain point too where she can sense the connection between Grogu and Din, and maybe realize that maybe Grogu, I keep wanting to say Grogu because I struggle with speaking, but I think that maybe Grogu and Din, or Din is who Grogu needs more than Jedi training right now. and maybe not wanting to tell him that because maybe he's not ready to hear it. So then just saying, I won't train him is enough. And then she goes to the Seeing Stone, which I think is going to be really interesting. And there's been a lot of discussion about, like, what Jedi could meet them there, but some of the Discords I'm in brought up the point of, what if he doesn't choose to call out with the Force? What if he chooses Din and no Jedi shows up? And how's Din gonna react then? You know, he went on this whole quest to get this kid Jedi training, and he's like, I don't want Jedi training, I want you and the knob and the Razor Crest. That's it.
Well, that brings up something that I think is really interesting, is like, so he was given this task, he was given this quest to, like, bring Grogu back to his people, to Jedi, not really knowing, like, a whole bunch like about Jedi, which is one reason why I think it's interesting that Ahsoka's the one that they met. So this particular view about Jedi is being painted, and so if he doesn't choose to, you know, go train and be, like, I think that could be part of it. Like, what does it mean to be a Jedi, especially like now in now times and everything that's happened. Because I don't know if I would personally choose. Yes, I would. I don't know if I would choose to be a Jedi.
I mean, I would. But I mean, I don't know if I could do that, though, to choose to be a Jedi, to walk away from the person that I care about most, like, in that moment. That would be hard. Like, in my head, me being a Jedi has always been, I was taken when I was 2 and I don't remember, and so that I just am a Jedi and I don't ever have to make that choice. But I don't know. Now
I'm thinking it feels just like Anakin and it feels like Anakin in the Phantom Menace all over again when he's leaving Shmi. And that would hurt me.
Well, and that's the danger, right? Of somebody going for training after they've had time to form attachments.
I mean, but do you really think that if Ahsoka had said, yes, I'll train him, but you obviously have a connection, so please stick around, that Din would have said no?
Right.
Like, I refuse to stay.
Right.
Like, I'm done with this child now. My quest is over. Move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Like,
I think if that situation happened, I think he would have stayed, but if he saw that his presence was hindering Grogu's ability to be a good Jedi, then he would have been like, this hurts, but I'm leaving so that you can reach your best potential. And then maybe, you know, chaos would ensue. He would do whatever he thought was best for his kid.
And I think he's confused about what that means right now, because I think he's dealing with a lot where, like, his whole concept of being a Mandalorian as a foundling, right? So his identity is already something that he thinks is, like, not his, that he's putting on. Like, I always think back to the moment in the first episode, I think it's the first one with Queel, where he's like, why can't you ride the blurg? Your people rode Mythosaur. And he's like, you know, that awkward moment when your people didn't ride the Mythosaur. And so, like, I think he's so struggling with needing to be a Mandalorian. And then he meets Bo, and Bo's like, yeah, you totally don't have to wear your helmet all the time. And he's like, you know, and so, like, for him, I think he so badly wants to not leave the way. And so he sees it as, like, I give the kid to the Jedi, and then I go back and I do my thing, and then life makes sense again, and it's not. And I almost think that he does need to walk away and or have Grogu taken from him before he's going to figure that out.
Well, I like that you bring it up, because I knew it, but I didn't think I realized how much they're both having an identity crisis at the exact same time, and how much you can't really help the other person because you don't know who you are. And so, oh my goodness, they're gonna have to be separated again. That's sad.
I'm just gonna go on record now saying that might be the, like, cliffhanger of this season, is where Gideon really gets Grogu and we don't know if he's alive or underwater. Like, it just because I'm certain at this point, like, we're beyond whether or not this is going to be renewed. Like, that's almost a certainty.
Yeah,
I would think.
But
if it's not already confirmed, so prepare ourselves for no resolution there.
Yeah. Lynn says, my secret dream for the show is for Din to somehow learn to ride the Mythosaur. I think we all would love to see that, personally.
What were the beasts from KOTOR 2 on Onderon that they had ridden in the past?
Yeah, frickin' A. They're from the Jedi, Tales of the Jedi comics too, and I can't, the ride, I don't remember. Ian will know. Ian! What are they? Ian will know.
That would be cool.
Ian will, putting you on the spot, Ian, tell me what they are. But no, I think, they're saying some similar things in chat that, they're called Beast Riders, but I can't remember what they fly. Drexel, thank you. Ian did know. Thank you, Ian. I love having people who know more than me in the chat because it's very helpful. But a couple of people in the chat were saying that Tython might not even happen this episode because we know Gideon's tracking them. And so it's just like, I think Gideon is maybe not done this season, but I think he's the confrontation at the end. I could see, part of me wants to say that Tython is like season 3, and part of me is like, this show has just been happening so fast. Like, we got Bo in the 3rd episode, we got Ahsoka like in the 5th, and those were both things that I thought maybe we would see by the end, you know? So part of me is like, I'll say Tython's the beginning of season 3, and then actually all of next week is at Tython.
I mean, it's like what I thought at the end of The Force Awakens. I'm like, all right, this next movie is going to be following this map to find Luke. And they're like, oh, no, we're there. And I'm like, oh, well, that's not what I thought was going to happen, but okay.
John says, if a Jedi does show up at the Seeing Stone, it should not be Luke or Ezra, maybe Cal. So a lot of people like Cal. My one beef with Cal is I want Jedi Fallen Order 2 to be amazing, and I'll have less of an experience if I know Cal lives through the game already. That's just my one thing with Cal. I don't want to know where he ends up. I want Cal to be protected for, like, his thing. But if he shows up, I'm not going to be like, I'm mad! You know, I'll be like, there's Cameron Monaghan, I'm so excited.
I'll be less upset than when Cameron Monaghan was the Joker and got him. That was...
After he was the Joker and then wasn't the Joker and then was the Joker again.
Yep. What do you think about what Mick said earlier? The ending of this season will have Bo-Katan trade Grogu for the Darksaber.
I didn't see that comment, but oh god, it's possible. It's really, because like Bo's intense. She's intense. Although I think she low-key wants to get Den back from the Children of the Watch, because she was in Death Watch, and then she was like, these Death Watch people are pretty cool, and then Maul killed Jon Favreau, and then she was like, maybe these people aren't cool anymore, and then now she's gonna be like, don't, like, take your helmet off sometimes, Den. So, like, I feel like part of it is gonna be, I don't know that she would do that, because even though she probably doesn't care at all about Grogu, she probably does care about, like, Din to some degree. But, like, also, she would totally do it for the Darksaber. It's true.
I mean, because, like, the whole purpose of the Darksaber, like, in Mandalorian lore is, like, once you have it, that, like, entitles you to be Mandalore.
Right.
Like, that's one of the things is, like, it wields a political, like, symbolism for the people of Mandalore.
Right.
And even out of, like, a sense of, like, nobility, I need to do what's best for my planet. This will be a rallying cry. We can spare one kid that nobody knows or has an attachment to, you know, for the good of a planet worth of people, you know. Like, I don't think she has to be evil for that to be her calculation.
Right. No, I agree.
Yeah, right.
Not that I'm down for it. I'm just saying.
No, that's...
It's a trolley problem kind of thing.
Yeah.
But Grogu is on the tracks.
And if it were me, it would literally be the entire rest of the galaxy for Grogu. Sorry, everyone.
All right, Anakin.
Hey, look, I'm just saying I understand now. I get it.
Mick also says, but what I can say for sure is that someone will fight Gideon with the Beskar spear. So, like, Darksaber on spear.
That would make sense. That's a good pickup. Because I was just thinking...
Check out Beskar spear.
Yeah, I was just thinking that I want to see Bo and Gideon face off, but what is she going to have that can rival the Darksaber? But if she has... If not the spear, something with Beskar, she could face off with him. Because that's... To me, that makes sense. Getting Tython... I think of all the things I screamed about in this episode, I probably screamed the loudest when I heard the word Tython. The Jedi freak that I am. But I still would love to see Mandalore in live action. I think that would be really cool.
And before we start to run out of time, I also want to say one of my favorite things about this episode was how like classic Japanese film inspired it was. Like even like shot for shot remakes.
Yep.
Like, and there's a whole bunch of pictures on Twitter and Reddit of like the framing and stuff. And I love like the call outs to that because it's like the Maul Obi-Wan fight at the end of Rebels.
Yep.
Right? Like it becomes just such it's quintessentially Star Wars, but it also just feels like such a true connection to some of that original source material. That was one of my favorite things about this episode too. I
loved it. And like I just everyone's entitled to their opinion, but like I do not understand some of the criticism this show has been getting. This episode got visually, because there are just some really spectacular frames from this episode.
Well, I was going to make a joke. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I thought that the last two, especially the way they were framed against each other, I thought they were amazing. I could understand if you didn't like how Ahsoka moved because you were used to her moving as a cartoon, and real people don't move that way, even with CGI. So I could understand why that would be weird. And this goes into part of what we were talking about before. I went into this episode being like, don't expect anything. Just don't expect her to be anything like, except the way she looks, which also was probably a little bit of the issue. Some people's issues. But so I was more willing to accept that because I was like, well, she's not going to move like a cartoon. She's not a cartoon.
Right. I gotta be honest, like, to me, the only, like, downside taint to the episode is what we mentioned at the top of the stream with the allegations that were there for Rosario. Because, like, otherwise, this is probably my favorite episode of the series so far.
Well, and we talked, you and I just talked a little bit about this before when I had asked you, I don't know the timeline of things, but why they didn't say anything, but whether it makes you feel better or not, we got that Vanity Fair article, and I was like, oh, okay, this is where they, and so, I'm not going to say, I don't exactly know how I feel, but because that was the only downside to me, also that, and then reading that article does something, I guess, which also that article addressed why everyone calls her a Jedi, and I was also about that, and that was super interesting. To me, because I really like that, because my whole big thing about having like other people come in was I never wanted to over like shadow Din and Grogu's story, and I feel like calling her a Jedi helps not do that, because like why would they know that she's not, and why would they care that she's not, and do they want the whole story about what happened? No, because they don't need to know, and we've already seen it. So I think it makes sense that like you would be called a Jedi and everyone would call her a Jedi, and then I was like, okay, no, never mind. I'm on board with all of that. They don't need to know that at all.
It's just, it's so much more. And I don't think Ahsoka would be the one that's going to, like, super correct him in that moment. Because clearly Din is confused about a lot of things. So, like, why give him one more thing? Ian
but there's Din not knowing about the Jedi at all. But there's also so much in canon and legends about people in general in the galaxy not understanding the difference between one person with a lightsaber and another person with a lightsaber. So like Jedi is, even like that was canon for a long time, that you were a dark Jedi, right? You weren't a Sith. Like that was a different, we didn't have that terminology. So I don't think it, like for Ahsoka, like that label means something, but to random person on the wall in this village, like that distinction doesn't mean anything to them.
I agree.
Also, if you've never seen the shows, if only you've ever watched The Mandalorian, it makes sense to you, and then you would go investigate all the other things that happen.
I completely agree. Ian was just asking if we felt like she embodied Ahsoka fully or not. And that's going to be a difficult question for people, depending on how they feel with the casting. And, like, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to, because, like, that's my biggest beef with Twitter in general, is, like, people will feel a certain way, and that's fine, and then people have to get in your mentions about it and be like, what? And, like, just never do that to people. So, like, if you don't like her, I'm not gonna get at you about it, and if you do, I'm not gonna get at you about it. But I struggled with her at the very beginning of the episode, just because I was getting used to seeing her in live action. But, like, on my second viewing, some of the facial expressions that Rosario does are, like, eerily close. Like, the last shot as the Razor Crest is flying away in that smirk, like, she sold it for me.
Yeah.
Personally.
I, surprisingly, and this is, like, not an insult to Ashley Eckstein, because obviously she's done an amazing job and I like her, but I was expecting to miss her voice a little bit, and I didn't. And so that was a bit of a shock to me. The one thing I'm super glad about with her casting is I'm glad that she was a person of color, and that they didn't, like, paint someone's skin orange. So that's the one thing I was super like, "Ooh, let's go." But yeah,
I think aside from the allegations, I think, like, and I hate to say that, but, like, at the same time, the casting is a good choice as long as things are on the up and up, you know?
I mean, the question of does she fully embody Ahsoka is difficult because, like, fully embody implies an awful lot, right? Like, like we can talk about the casting in Solo, right? Like, do they fully embody Lando and Han? Or even, like, with, I'm blanking on the name, the new Chewbacca actor. Like, does he fully embody...
Jonas Sumato, I think.
Yeah. Like, or, like, fully embody means a lot, you know, in a lot of ways. And so, like, I don't know that it's possible to... I mean, you could have taken Ashley Eckstein and like, done her up in an Ahsoka cosplay, and it would not have been a full embodiment of Ahsoka, right? So, like, but for me, I have such a complicated history with the character of Ahsoka, not, like, complicated, like, politically, but, like, Ahsoka was the reason I did not watch the Clone Wars, right? Like, I saw the first little bit of the Clone Wars, and I'm like, I can't do, like, this character is too kitschy for me. It's aimed at a demographic that's not for me. Like, I came very late to the Clone Wars game because of Ahsoka, and it was only on a rewatch, and then with Rebels, which I experienced, you know, live, and so Rebels is the show, you know, near and dear to my heart, the same way that a lot of people feel about the Clone Wars, and it's that version of Ahsoka that's my Ahsoka, you know, in the way people, like, talk about which doctor is their doctor on Doctor Who and stuff like that. Like, Rebels Ahsoka is my Ahsoka, like, late Clone Wars Ahsoka is my Ahsoka, and this felt very much like that to me. It's very easy for me to see how an Ahsoka who lived her whole life post, you know, Fall of the Republic, who, you know, was the fulcrum in secrecy, who has been hardened by life, like, is not necessarily... I mean, Obi-Wan is the same way, right? Like, Obi-Wan is not the same type of quippy he is in the Clone Wars either. But so I guess my answer to that is yes, and it's less about the visuals for me. You know, I thought it was funny that the internet got so worked up about the links of her Leku. I mean, that's just, like, a stylistic thing. Or, like, I follow a lot of the cosplay community on, like, Instagram, and there were some people that got, like, really hardcore into, like, the wrinkles on her Leku, and they're like, oh, they should have used a different type of silicone, and I'm like, I get that's the thing you care about, but that's, like, I'm not a prop designer, so I
have
can't
a
get
theory.
into
I have a theory about the Leku, that they're like, that Togruta are like camels, and she's just dehydrated. That's my theory. Again, this is why I should never write Star Wars, because I would literally invent a whole story to explain how they're like camel humps.
I think another thing that makes this question so interesting, which Django, I think is something that you were getting at, is it depends on like when and how you got into Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And then also who your favorite, because like I understand that Ahsoka's beloved and I like her, but like I do not care that much.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it like came to all those things, I was just like, oh yeah, cool, she's here. And I kept going. And because I like her, but she's not like my favorite, I don't have all of the things that have the gripes and things. And so then it just works out like that.
Makes sense.
Meanwhile, I saw Ahsoka on screen and cried.
Yeah.
It's the same reaction I would have if Freddie Prinze Jr. showed up on something as Kanan.
Right.
Like I would like just pass out from the shock of it.
I think when they go to the town at the end and she like slices that bell in half, that was the point where I went, I am literally witnessing this. This is really happening. It is in front of me. And like I had like that was my moment of like, oh my god.
And I think this is also a conversation that doesn't matter in reverse either.
Right.
For those people who start with The Mandalorian and then go back to Rebels and the Clone Wars, like this will not be a thing they care about. Right. And so like I think they're not to say that, not to be either gatekeepy or to say that the thoughts and concerns of longtime fans don't matter. But this is a type of thing where it matters in a lot of ways. Like Gina said, you know, when are you coming to this and what perspective do you have? Because if this is the first time you've ever seen, I mean, if you're Jess's mom and you're watching this with her and you have to have explained who Ahsoka is, like you 100% don't care, right? This is Ahsoka, right? Like this is, like this casting is Ahsoka. Like the length of the Leku are the very last thing you could ever care about because this is Ahsoka for you.
We spent a good 2 hours on it's Ahsoka and not Ahsoko, but we got there. I love my mother. She's fun to watch Star Wars with.
I mean, my family for a hot second always pronounced it Asuka. So
I'm one to talk. I can't pronounce anything. So
I also can't pronounce things. It's okay. I was like, I understand what you're saying.
I mean, but like, is there something to be had, like a conversation with casting Katie Sackhoff as Bo-Katan and then casting somebody different as Ahsoka? Like, that doesn't bother me. Like, I don't have a problem with that, but given that both of those things happened, like, almost back to back, like, is there anything to that? I mean, there may not be.
Personally, oh, sorry. If you...
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, with Bo-Katan, other than maybe, like, hair color, like, Katie Sackhoff looks like the character, is the right age for the character, has the physicality to do the character, like, we've seen her in action roles. Like, there was really no reason to not do it, other than if there was a scheduling conflict or you just didn't like her or something, where Ashley, like, she is the voice in so many ways, but doesn't have the physicality for Ahsoka. Does she? I don't think she has the physical presence to be Ahsoka on screen. I guess that's the difference for me, and it's a subjective thing, but I think that's for me.
Yeah, I think this came from the Vanity Fair article, and anyone's allowed to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Dave was like, I started thinking about Rosario in the role because all the fans were suggesting it, and so I think probably there was this seed planted in him that he just like maybe let stew or roll a bit and started building ideas around. So I think that's also where part of it comes from. He's been living with this idea. And then the other part of it comes from, which is a long tangent that we obviously do not have to get into. But and I was telling you about this earlier, Jess, this idea of non-humans being coded as people of color. And so there's also that idea that I think, and that goes to the whether she looks like she can, play the part.
Right. Well, and somebody mentioned Zoe Saldana earlier too, and that's a lot of that conversation around Guardians of the Galaxy too. Is why does otherness have to read as blackness, and why does blackness have to read as otherness in that way? Yeah.
I mean, the one person of color in your cast is green is a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a thing, intentional or not, it's a thing. But I think that's part of it too, and I think that it's easy for me to say, I guess, but I think it's really good that of them to recognize that it meant a lot to so many fans to have Ahsoka played as a person of color, and then to act on it when they easily could have found somebody else and then like had Ashley dub the voice, and that would have been a safe choice and maybe not a mean choice or an intentionally hurtful one, because you're trying to find a way to get the voice actress to continue the role. But it was, I think they ultimately went with the right instinct, even if there's a debate on if they picked the right individual.
Plus it helps that I think Ashley made like an Instagram post or something, so it also helps that when the actresses seem to, you know, be cool, that it just feels nice too.
I agree. I think that's good.
I mean, and also given what we know about the budget of this show, they could have like, you know, done the Tarkin effect and like had a completely CGI character, and like, I mean, one, I think it's possible that Ahsoka doesn't matter to Jon Favreau the way she does to Dave Filoni.
Yes.
But I think there's a lot of intentionality behind that deserves some recognition in important ways.
Now, I know we're getting at time, so real quick, because I think it was Ian who mentioned it a ways back, and we would be reticent to not mention at all the name drop of the person that the magistrate worked for, in that, with the Thrawn name drop. Do you guys think that that's going to be relevant to Mando? Or do you think this is the Marvel Cinematic Universe seeding of a Rebels sequel?
This idea actually fully goes to Sky Talkers, because I do not care about Thrawn. So I was like, okay, you said his name. But I don't think he's going to be relevant to The Mandalorian. And I think that's fully just to be like, this is what she's doing. This is why she's out here, and can set up something else. Because I think it would be weird for us to not understand what Ahsoka here. So yeah, sets up something else, not important to this show, hopefully.
And I think I would say the same thing as somebody that cares an awful lot about Thrawn. And like Mick, and I don't know if Mick was the one that mentioned it earlier, but you know, with the HK droids, which I thought was a really great callback too, just the presence of the HK droids, but that they had Thrawn's fleet logo on them. Like, I like that kind of thing as an Easter egg.
Yeah.
But it's the same reason why, you know, and again, I know I disagree with some people about this, but it's why I didn't want Boba Fett. You know, it's why I worry about, you know, the inclusion of these characters who I love overshadowing what's going on. As much as I want, you know, more Rebels content minus Ezra Bridger, who's a waste of Star Wars space.
He threw the gauntlet down.
But like, I want that Rebel sequel as much as I do too, but I don't want Mando to be my Rebel sequel, right?
Right.
I think there's an interesting story going on here that doesn't involve Thrawn, and I think it's fair enough. Like exactly what Gina said. I'll give you credit for this. Is that, you know, you had to have some explanation for why she's there, and that works as much as anything else. The one thing about that confuses me is that it confuses me in terms of where this fits with the Rebels epilogue.
Right. Like,
does it come before the epilogue or in the middle of the epilogue? Like, that's my only question there, but that's not a question I need answered by this show, and I would actually be kind of disappointed if it didn't.
I think for me, I definitely don't want Mando to be the Rebels sequel. I would like Rebels to get its actual sequel. I would prefer a Rebels sequel to stay in medium and be animation. I think that would be important. I would love a Rebels sequel that would also make me like Ezra Bridger. Let's see if it's possible. I try to give him some slack because I didn't like Ahsoka for like 3 or 4 seasons, and Rebels was shorter than Clone Wars, so like maybe there's a chance when he gets older. But you know, it's okay. We did this to Ray when she was on here, and she was like, oh, because she's like a super big Ezra fan. Like, you can like Ezra. He needs fans.
Yeah.
But I do want to know where he is. I am like, he's stuck out there in whale space somewhere, doing who knows what. I would love to know where this falls, but I want Rebels to get its own sequel. However, I would still like Thrawn to connect to the show some way, but not in an overshadow way. Like, I would love to... I don't know how it's going to fit with where they go with the rest of the season, but it would be really cool to see him and Gideon as rival warlords, and to kind of see that. We've not really seen Empire versus Empire on screen in current canon, as far as I'm aware, unless I'm completely blanking on something. So I would love something like that. I think there's room for it, depending on what the actual Rebels sequel... Yeah, John and I are vibing here.
I feel like it'd be fun. It'd be a little... The only thing I can think of it'd be like is your favorite guy. It'd be like a little like Krennic versus Tarkin a little bit.
Yeah.
Like who's gonna come out on top, etc.
Who's the top?
Except we knew who's gonna come out on top. Except we knew the answer to that when we were watching Rogue One. Unless you'd never seen A New Hope before, which is also valid. Also, I was gonna say that I feel like anyone who watches this in the future, or Jon Favreau who watches this in the future, is gonna think that I just gonna think I don't like Star Wars because I like Rebels like a lot actually, but like I don't have strong opinions on Ezra. People are like, who does Gina have strong opinions about? I have some, but like
Ben Solo.
He could never show up again. It's true. Yeah, like he could never show up again. He could show up again, and I would just be like, "Hey, I'm watching this." I guess.
I mean, my two least favorite characters come out of my two favorite things in Star Wars.
It's true.
So, like, and Thrawn is relevant to both of them. So, well, Nora Wexley's the other one for people who are wondering.
Yeah.
Also,
Nora. Oh, why? You never trust a Y-wing pilot. We're just throwing all the shade right now. We're gonna get so many people unsubscribing over our Y-wing opinions. Ian wants to know where's Boba. Boba's probably gonna be season 3 at this point.
Yeah.
I still maintain that was a one-off cameo, and you will never see Boba Fett again. Like you will never know if that is Boba Fett. That's like no, that's gonna forever be a reference out there to keep the myth of Boba Fett alive, and you will never see that again.
I'm okay with that.
That would be something. I really want Din to go back to Tatooine, like after he's, like taken his helmet off, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't die," and like he's like, "Okay, I can take my helmet off sometimes." I want him to go back to Tatooine with the armor and go back to Cobb and be like, "Look, I was wrong. This looks really good on you. You should keep it." And then, they'll just have like a really awkward. He'll be like, "I'll have that drink with you now," and
he invites him to the school.
The school. The school. There were no kids in that town. Cobb. Why does everybody want to go back to Tatooine? Because Cobb's there. I think now that we have Cobb Vanth, there should never be the question of why we are on Tatooine again. We are there because Cobb Vanth is there.
I mean, that's why Rey buried the lightsabers there, right?
Because yes. In fact, they should just do a new cut of The Rise of Sky. This is in the Super Dumpster Fire edition.
You now have a producer and a writing credit now, Jane.
You do. She's not going to be Rey Vanth. And tell me one person who would be angry if she changed her name to Rey Cobb Vanth. No one is the answer.
Everyone's gonna love it.
Everyone would love it.
I don't know that J.J. Abrams would be on board, but
yes,
well.
Look, JJ, he got the rest of the movie how he wanted. We can change a couple of seconds.
We will appease JJ because I will add 15 more flares into the film.
In fact, Palpatine will just be a lens flare.
I mean, I still think this series ends with Din going back to the farm planet and hanging out with farm life. Settling down.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many people who should just come back. Now I want to see Rey fight a Crad Dragon. soothe it, and ride it. Rey riding a dragon is what I need in my life.
That Crate Dragon episode means so much more to me now that I just finished reading Dune for the first time. this is a different thing now.
That was on our stream when I was like, we did Dune before. Anyway.
Once again, adding
right here. The sequel just arrived in my mailbox literally while we were doing this.
I was going to say, once again, adding to the list of characters that Gina had to warm up to, I would have liked Rey faster and sooner if she had been riding a dragon in The Force Awakens. And I would have immediately been like, woo, Rey.
Everyone is improved by riding a dragon. There is no one who is unimproved by riding a dragon. That's just a rule of life.
It's a fact.
So, on that note, do we have any final comments about this episode?
I think my only other comment is, and I don't remember who said this earlier. I think it might have been Ian or Mick, one or the other. Mm-hmm. But this boils down to whether or not you like Dave Filoni's Star Wars as to whether or not you like this episode. Like, this episode stylistically, I mean, obviously it's not animated, but like with the callbacks to Japanese film, with the way things are staged, with the inclusion of Ahsoka, like this was Dave's episode.
Yep.
And if you are, as some people mistakenly are of the belief that Dave has ruined Star Wars, then this is probably not the episode for you.
Right.
But if you are correct and say that Dave is the closest thing to George Lucas that we're ever going to get, then this was a fun episode. Mm-hmm. Whether you care about Ahsoka, whether you care about the Thrawn mention, this was a good episode.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I would just like to reiterate that I'm very proud of my Jedi son Grogu, and that he is perfect. And he is beautiful. He has never done a thing wrong in his life, even though he's chaotic evil. And I am very excited to see more adventures of my chaotic evil Jedi son Grogu.
And I am counting down the days until Dan finally takes off his helmet and he just doesn't have it on anymore. And I will be living my best life when that happens.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for being in the chat. If you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like the stream on your way out. Thank you for being there. It's great that we got a day with the three of us to talk about Mando. Just to reiterate, if you missed it, book club is moved to tomorrow because we did the stream today. I'll still do the 40 days stuff. And then I don't know if we've actually found out if we can do Friday or not again, but hopefully the plan is Friday for 14. But thank you all for being here, and we will see you around. Bye.
Bye.